I know several of you I don't know, but welcome. Thanks for coming. Um, there's probably going to be a lot of questions at the end, so maybe I think we'll probably go through and have plenty of time for questions at the end. So the story really begins. It's about the relationship between the land, the water, and the people, and that's really where we start. And so I thought it would most appropriate to start here and talk about the indigenous cultures that were here before us. The Watlala village, this is the Watlala people that inhabited the gorge area from like Skamania or Bonneville down through Multnomah County. And I wanted to recognize these folks amongst the other people who were here. The indigenous people were really throughout this whole region. The Watlala bands of the Chinook or the Cascade Chinook in this lower sandy watershed. In the upper watershed, we did have the Warm Spring bands in the upper corner there, the Wasco bands of the Chinook, which are now part of the tribes of the Warm Plains. The Yakima tribe did come down toward the Columbia, and then of course to the west, the Cowlitz tribe, and then from the south we have the Clackamas bands of the Chinook. And oftentimes we say, oh, these are the indigenous folks that lived in the land, but it's really like that there were people here who mastered living on the land, right? So the art of living was mastered. Like they have this connection to this place that is so deep that I don't know that we, in our sense of being, really can understand how deep that really goes. For 15,000 or more years, people really had mastered this place. And it's from this perspective that I think we derive our approach to this work that we do. This is a photo of what the land use looks like right now, sense of land ownership. This is showing some coho populations here, but I really wanted to show the colors here, showing how so much of this land is in federal ownership or in state ownership, and then there's some urban lands here too. And so, of course, back in the days, before there was a sense of land ownership, we didn't really consider this. And so what we're doing here is like land management, right? We see ourselves in a different position that perhaps the indigenous people did, where there was this kind of interconnectedness of being with a place that really was that relationship between the land, water, and the people that we have become disconnected from in that way. And I think you all have probably done your reading and you probably understand this in a way. But I wanted to reinforce this idea with some images. This is a slide that I got from Dr. King some time ago. This is showing the campus of the Mount Hood Community College in Troutdale, right on the verge of Troutdale aggression. At a period of time, there was forest and prairie that was then converted to agriculture. And at this time in the 60s, there was still quite a lot of agriculture in this area. And then the campus got dropped in here. And over the times, in a very short period of time, from the 1960s into now, you see a real dramatic change in how the land is being used. So you see in the far distance, there's some commercial, industrial type facilities. There is residential and commercial all throughout. There is now this conversion of farmland to urbanization. So you're seeing this kind of trajectory go from a time of connection to this time of disconnection. You see here, this is the Beaver Creek Mountain Center, the Sandy River. And this is the theme that I kind of think about a lot because, I think we're in the time right now where we're trying to become reconnected with the place. And there's some things we do well. There's smelt dipping still that occurs, although the last run is not looking too good. Um, there are endangered species add, of course, the smelt, the coho, the chinook, the steelhead. We're making some, changes in how we manage stormwater, like these fire retention cells. And so, in a way, we're trying here to reconnect, but the things that we're doing are not yet enough. And I think one of the reasons is that we haven't quite kind of resolved the sense of connection, what that really means for us. And that is to have people and the place connected together. And it's really the starting point for how we do our work. So when we started this project to form this new Watershed Council, this is really where we began. You may know that the original Watershed Council existed from the mid-90s up through 2021 when it dissolved. And for the reasons for that are numerous, but finances, leadership, the things that you might think of were at play. So the council dissolved, so it went away. And then in the following year, I was approached by three former board members about starting a new watershed council. And right around the time where the council dissolved, there were some folks, including myself, Luke Johnson is here, Alex Hale is in the front here. We were part of an equity committee. And this is right before COVID and Black Lives Matter. And we're really having trouble getting traction on this. And of course, during the times of Black Lives Matter, when that was really important, we wrote letters affirming our support for Black lives and things. Yet still, there was kind of limited traction. And I think this is representative of this disconnect between the people who live, work, play in the watershed and this place. And at the time when they approached me, I said, I'll only do it if we center on equity. And everybody was on board with this idea. I was actually very surprised. They really felt like the work that we had been doing was the right path. And so we embarked on this journey to start a new watershed council with this in mind. Uh, there were several steps that we took starting in 2022 up to now. The community needs assessment, the organizational charter, getting new board members, getting staff, getting funds, and then developing this network. And I wanted to say how throughout this journey, it has always been steeped in the sense of equity, diversity, justice, inclusion, and that we never stop to say, oh, equity and diversity is one of these lines here, right? We do all this stuff and then we're going to add in equity. That's how a lot of people see this work. It's like this add-on, or the last presentation we saw was like an incident, a disturbance of some kind. But what we did was we took it from the core, and I think this is how we really should do it. In the last presentation we just saw about the coups and the Curry watershed, they're saying foundational DNA exists and is important. This is a moment where this is also true, that while we start with this is the foundational DNA of this organization. And I hope that this persists over time and that doesn't get watered down. Yeah, here's a picture of us as our first outing. We were too broke to have a tent, but we still tabled anyway. But that's our humble beginnings. When I say equity-based, I'm not sure if everybody's fully centered on what that means, but some of the outcomes that I think of, shared cultural values from the diverse community, having a multicultural diversity on the board, of course, having indigenous voices, having power resource sharing among organizations that are partnering with this group, having inclusivity, and that goes in all the ways, right? Having the ideas, the identities, the language that we use, all those things have to be there. And then finally, an outcome would be to have culturally specific events and outreach. So one of the great things that we did first, this is one of the kind of cornerstones, this is community needs assessment. Generous funding from the Jacobs Family Foundation, who we pitched this idea and said, look, we want to start a place-based and equity-based organization. They were fully on board, and they gave us a good chunk of money to get this going. We hired a group called Community Engagement Liaisons, cells. It's a firm that does community engagement, and they had liaisons throughout the community and helped us develop the plan and the strategy to do this. We asked people, how do people interact with the river and land? What are their concerns? And then what are the thoughts about what this organization should do? And what we did was we shopped this around in two different ways. One was we had an online survey, and we had the liaisons go out and basically put up posters, meet with partners, and we got 200 responses from the whole watershed, from the Mount Hood area all the way down to the mouth. And we had 3 people who were people of color, and we also did some focus groups. We had a series of 6 focus groups. The indigenous community members was one, Spanish-speaking community members another. We had the BIPOC group, and then we also had environmental educators who were working with culturally specific communities, community planning organizations in the upper watershed. These are the kind of rural kind of neighborhoods, and then just generally rural residents and ag folks. And we had this idea that we wanted to talk with people who really hadn't had a voice or who hadn't really been a part of the old Watershed Council. One of my criticisms of the old Watershed Council is that the partnership building, the network building was kind of weak. Let's say it straight. That the work into these communities to build stewards amongst these communities was really low. And so I think we had never really engaged in these communities, and so that was really important. What was interesting was that there was a lot of similarity, actually, amongst this cross-section of folks that had participated. Of course, everybody had this kind of deep personal connection to the watershed. As you may know, the Mount Hood area, there's a lot of recreation, there's a lot of fishing, there's hunting, food gathering. There's just a lot of great trails and just kind of places to sit and kind of contemplate nature and things. So people really felt like they had a personal kind of stake in this. Yet, quite broadly, there was this desire to connect more because they had not only done those things, but also to connect with the indigenous community. And I think that this is part of the kind of the narrative that is happening around the state of Oregon and beyond, where we're learning that, traditional ecological knowledge, this connection that people have had for this time. I'm just gonna snooze these, or I think I need to do an interview right now. Um, so that there is something else that can bring us to this place of reconnection. And I think without having to tell people about it, this is a kind of awareness has happened. But there's also a sense of stewardship. I think, water pollution, trash, these are things that people, I think, understand a little bit more clearly. And so that was the top concern. Of course, protecting fish and wildlife, super, super high concern as well. In the upper watershed, protection from wildfires and floodings, that was a big concern. And that's more unique in the upper watershed than the lower. But for folks in the lower, having improved access to recreation for people with disabilities and also to improve, say, safety and swimming, these are more important for the lower watershed. So while there were some kind of geographic differences, there was a lot of commonality, and there was commonality too in this vision that they had. The idea that they really wanted to know more. They wanted to know more about the history, not only this kind of settler, but the indigenous community too. They wanted to have improved opportunities for recreation, as I mentioned, in a number of different ways, including hosting cultural events. I mean, if you go to the Sandy River right now, you'll see that there are a lot of people of color out there. There are Southeast Asians, there are Latino groups, uh, there are a whole bunch of people, a lot of different kinds of people. And we don't really think of those folks as like, oh, this is like your Watershed Council audience often. I know the old Watershed Council didn't, but there's a lot of opportunity here. Oh, I should highlight here that the indigenous leadership and use of the area, this was something that a lot of people called for. It wasn't just the indigenous focus group. A lot of folks in the survey said, this is meaningful. This is something that we want to do. And I was really, really, really pleased about that. Opportunities for stewardship and culture sharing, building new diverse partnerships. These are things that now we have taken in and said, well, what is our next step with this? And that was to create an organizational charter. So the Jubis Family Foundation saw the results of the community needs assessment and said, wow, this is really great work. Let's give you some more funds. And so we gladly accepted. And now this is now coming into a total of $100,000 that the Jubis Family Foundation has offered to us. And we started this work knowing that we need people who not only have ties to the watershed, but also have experience with equity and diversity. And so we had was kind of like, who do we know type situation, but we went on a 6 months journey with 9 folks, including Alex here in the room, and Luke is also here, former board member. We had a professional facilitator, Tony DeBoer from Esper House, and the charter here was to create our mission, vision, and values, and basically describe, how would I say the mission, vision, and value based on the community assessment. So translating that work, and then also describe how we're going to achieve our mission, and then how our values are centered. These documents are available online, so I don't want to go too much in detail, but I did want to focus in on the values here, because I think these values are fairly unique to our organization. And when I talk about foundational DNA, this is it, right? If we're attracting people to this organization, say, oh, I'd like to, see if you're interested in becoming a board member, or would you like to help volunteer, or would you like to be a partner of ours? This is the founding document. Like, you have to be in on this. You have to feel like, oh, yes, inclusion through relationship. I want to build community relationships with the intention of care across diverse cultures, identities, generations, and interests. That feels like something that my values are aligned with. Diverse perspectives, uplift diverse connections and relationships to the Sandy Watershed with humility, respect, and love. Like, we have to have people who are on board with it, right? The culture of care, practicing culture of joy, connection, learning, care, and repair. Equitable power sharing, share power and decision making, prioritizing the most impacted and historically excluded voices. Google, what is Indigenous Connections? Uh, Indigenous Connections, center and embrace the Indigenous connections and knowledge of the watershed, acknowledging the impacts of colonization, especially in communities. Innovate for resilience and justice. Explore and implement ideas and innovations around natural systems in ways that move us towards resilience and justice. So these are our six values. And when I see other people's values in their strategic plans, the values are things that we kind of write. These are things that make us feel good, but we're not really like living through those, right? But I expect that anyone who's associated with our organization will see these and say, yeah, this is aligned with my personal values and my cultural values. And that the behaviors that then arise from those will be of stewardship in a way that really revolves around these things. And so I really feel like this is very important. And this is, in fact, like the DNA of the organization. Um, I expect that that will then continue into the future. Um, we have had, well, a lot of folks support us, I think, because we're doing this work in the way that we're doing it. And I think in the time and space that we're in right now, the funding is now limited when you use the DEI language, and people are kind of pulling back. I've heard some people say like, oh, we're gonna, change the language, which is cool. I understand. But like, this is time to double down on diversity, equity, inclusion. I think you all agree that the people who are needing their connection with the watershed, this is the time, especially people of color. And so for groups to come out to help fund this enterprise, I really applaud. And that Brian Walcott's in the back, Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, he helped us with the capacity grant. Super grateful, Brian. Juma's Family Foundation, we had a meeting with them the other day. I thought, we asked for a lot of money already. They called us and they were like, hey, how are you doing? And so I was like, oh, let me introduce you to Leslie. And they said, we really dig what you're doing. You guys have really delivered. Of course, Leslie had a lot of great words there, talking straight with them, and they loved it. And they said, just tell us what you need, right? I mean, this is what I'm talking about. It's like you got to be committed to it. You got to commit to this. And that's like we wouldn't expect funds from someone who wasn't committed, right? I'm going to turn that around. East Multnomah SWCD, Clackamas SWCD, I see Cappy's here and folks are here. I mean, like to come in with the money and say, yeah, we believe this. This is the way to do it. This is really encouraging. I work for Multnomah County, so of course my program it goes into this work, and then some private donations too we've already accepted. So yeah, this is kind of where we're at now. So we have a diverse board in age and culture. We have a new director, Dr. Leslie King, and we are really embarking on this process right now. So I appreciate everybody's support and everybody's interest. This work is, say it, it's just worth it. This is the time. So, and we have a new website. Should I click on that first? Yeah, sure, should I do it though? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sandyriverwatershed.org. Of course, we're just starting out, so nothing's completed yet, but we are getting there next. And so let me turn this over to you, Leslie, and then we can talk about how we're going to do work. Yeah.
Thank you. Many of you I've seen or met before. For all of you I've not, hello, my name is Dr. Leslie King. I've done a bunch of teaching in the equity space. I teach a lot of environmental justice. Given varying talks, whether it's York or botanical gardens or this, that, or the other. Been a commissioner for the Fish and Wildlife, had lots of interactions with lots of state agencies. But recently, in fact, maybe it was even last week, one of the times Roy and I were talking, he sent me this slide and I just about lost my mind. I was just like, this is who I am, just how I came out cooked. And finally, it has a term, a word, like I get it now. It's like suddenly you have a family. You're like, wow, yay. And I think, but what I think was often missing, in terms of how things get lost in translation, particularly culturally, is I was always in the obnoxious aggression, defensiveness. You know, being a black woman in particular, when you are forceful, when you are on it, when you speak truth to power, you're angry. That is the label I have gotten my entire life. And I'm actually rarely angry, to be quite frank. If I'm angry, you'll know. But like when I'm just speaking to you, I'm just speaking to you. Right. And so one of the things that Roy really helped me with was talk about the care. If you care and say exactly the same thing, well, then they can't call you angry. And that's where the whole radical candor concept comes from. And so I've kind of been leading a lot more with that about things I have done or things that I've said or groups I've helped or how we're trying to move the needle. And I've also worked on a bit of this. So this is actually from pediatrics. So I'm a doctor by trade. And we deal with this hill a lot. And we talk about insecure canyon. And one of the things that, like, this is like, you know, the child's hill, you're invincible. And then life hits you and you fall down the hill. And then you realize as an adult, you're constantly kind of modulating. You know, life is a journey. And one of the things that I've been able to see, if you will, like, for example, what happened here recently when many phases of our government collapsed and people were losing their jobs left, right, and center. And there was kind of this whole shattering of people's worldview. I was able to just scoot right across. I never had the insecure canyon. And part of it is because of who I am and how I live. If you're from a marginalized community, the government's always lied to you. They've always reneged on promises. They've always stolen. They've always lied. Like nothing about that's new. So I was just like, well, welcome to life, people. Where you guys been? But instead of coming off like that, I just sort of said, you know what? These people are actually going through real struggle. They're being traumatized. This isn't right. They don't deserve that. So I just kind of adjusted a little bit just because I can zip right across. Just say a few more words and acknowledge people's pain and helping them along that way and recognize like what you've been a part of this whole time. It's hard to see what you're in. But now they see it. It's kind of like, you know, now they're seeing behind the curtain. And that's why I think DEI and the things that we're calling it and all these like verbal acrobatics that we're kind of having to do now, that's why it's resonating so much more, is because people feel it and see it themselves. And they kind of just start to realize like, who's been included? Who set this up? And why? And these whole power dynamics we got going on. And like, just time out. Can we go to the beginning? Like, recently I was invited to, and I kind of didn't even know why. It was like women in transportation. I was like, my goodness, huh? But lovely people invited me. And so I went. You got like the typical, like all of these things. You get the ticket for your lunch, a ticket for a drink, you know, blah, blah. And so I'm sitting there, and the very first slide was a picture of redlining. And I suddenly knew I was there. Is that we're starting to see this whole mantra, like, even in transportation, they're realizing redlining set people up. It literally trapped them in where they were forced to live. And then zoning happened, and highways were built around them. And then all of a sudden, these people started having health effects that other neighborhoods didn't. And these people were literally trapped. And they're trapped by their environment. And like it's a whole systemic thing that you begin to see. And we're seeing that in environment, we're seeing it in so many ways. And so suddenly it's just sort of like, you know, like people, and this was like, I don't know, I think she worked for Oregon Health Authority of all things. So like, you're like, where is this even coming from? And then why did they reach out to me? But I'm starting to realize more and more people are beginning to see what I'm seeing and applying it to their field, which is, I think that's why what Roy is talking about, why equity is really moving. Because like, I've had to flip what I call it, depending if you're with feds. If you say the word, they'll be fired. But you can still talk about it. You just have to just get clever about it. And people are finding that way. Like they're framing it in transportation. I'm talking about redlining. They're actually talking about equity. They're just not saying it. So that's kind of why I think so much of this is taking so much traction, is because the people that are out there speaking that radical candor in their own way, everyone's like, hallelujah, thank you. Like, how can I apply this to my work? And so that brings us to this. So we will go through this super quick. In fact, we probably won't even go through all of it, because some of it I can't even see. Hang on. So what this is, if you've ever seen what I do story maps, I think. So we talked about if we so control click to follow link. Control click. Let's try that. Oh,
This guy.
It's not connected.
oh dear.
The cord.
Well, it went black and then now it's doing nothing.
Let's take a look and see that the whole screen went black.
Well, yeah, well, it's not projecting up behind you.
Oh yeah, I know that. But
Yeah,
did
it was
it?
black and then it came back.
But it went back. He didn't have to log back in.
I think so.
Okay.
Through my work, I also have environmental training, so I've been doing a bunch of stuff in the environmental space, like teaching, serving on commissions and committees. And over those years, I met Roy, and as we found out that they were doing something new with Sandy, he thought I'd be a good fit for the organization. And so it took them years as we went through the process with their charter and all the different things. Um, this January, so January 6th is finally when we did the hire, we did all the process and we're ready pre-holidays, but then everyone went on vacation. But January 6th was the first day of disposition. So 3 months in now. And again, we did this based on, again, centering on equity, centering on voices that aren't heard, centering on some of the things that I still face. For example, I was emailing this morning with OWEB because there was a big boo at the last meeting. Because I talked about the 18 different species in Portland, how we're kind of outsized with the amount of endangered species that are within our city limits. And one of the advisory board members torpedoed the vote by kind of getting on there and saying, well, I don't think there's that many species. I don't think Dr. King has that right. It was really a good thing that was a virtual meeting. Because of course, everybody voted, not just me. And it's about what do you see? And we're still facing that with
You need the
OWEB.
website part up now?
Is that the story map?
Yep.
And they're saying they're going to have an urban panel, which we've been asking for years. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to bring in people who do restoration in urban areas. I'm just like, okay.
There you go. No problem.
All right. And now how do we make that full size?
Um,
Make it the screen.
and do the annoying thing where you have to look over here and move the mouth around your shoulder.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
That's all right. Well, that works. And so now the question is, if I do this, yes, it does work. So it's a little bit faded out. But here, it's one of the plays of the birthday equity. Okay. So instead of saying DEI, it's just say JI. It stands for justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. But it's also Star Wars. So if ever you're in question or you're in a group where there's feds and they can't be at a place where you're talking about DEI, Star Wars. They're allowed to be here. So, I mean, it's just about being clever about what you say, even though we're saying precisely the same thing. I'm using all the same slides, the same maps. I'm just doing something that they can be a part of. Okay. And back to your question, it's about, again, seeing when OWEB says we're bringing in people who've done restoration in urban areas. People? I'm talking about people. Like, are we including their voices? Are we including a place like Gresham Troutdale, which is 18.5% immigrant, over almost twice the state average. 91 languages spoken. Are we bringing in that? Or are we talking about a group that did a restoration in an urban area? So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's about shifting that and really seeing it and really embracing these people that have never been embraced, voices that have never been heard, people that have never been seen. So that's what this is about. And this is something that I face all the time in kind of the whole natural resources space. That value systems are fine. It's about pivoting that preposition. It's not an or, it's an and. There is nothing wrong with the ethos of opening up river miles for fish. Fantastic. Glad it happens. But if that's your whole metric, then you don't see all of the other ones that I'm talking about. Like how many fish in a place like Portland, like in a place like Sandy, we're talking about 9 different species. What about temperature in a place that's a heat island? What about refuge? Like, what about all of these other things? There is nothing wrong with river miles of fish. I commend it. I'm saying there's all these other things that we as humans can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can also bring in some of those metrics and talk about those things and value them and give them the rank order they deserve. Okay? So that is, and like I said, I think how I typically do my story maps, if I do this, it's called share, I think. So you can copy that QR code and follow along in case the stupid thing spazzes out again. So I typically do that at the beginning of the presentation. And then people can look on their own devices. It should adjust to your screen, those sorts of things. Also, it is simply a link. And at any time, anyone can reach out to us. We can just flick you the link. That's the other reason story maps are great. They're not huge files. It's a link. Okay. All right. So that gets us hopefully rolling. And then the other thing about story maps is there's these headers. So a bunch of them I'm going to skip. But we're going to start at sense of place because I've given up with people knowing where they are. All right. But things like the Kelly Dam one, the Stand Up Safe Campus, that talks about some of the stuff that was in Roy's presentation already, like that, the postcard of Mount Hood Community College when it was completed in 72 or whatever. So some of those you've seen, but let's start with sense of place. River loads. Yes. Okay. So I started literally with where we are. Northwest United States, Pacific Rim, Ring of Fire, all that. And then as we scroll, and if it works, come on, little thing, to the Northern Shoshone Territory, Agua-Pion River of the West, 33rd State of the Union, 1859. Everybody knows that, right? Scrolling more, we zoom in, we see the 36 counties, things that are represented here, right? 100,000 square miles. I think we're the 9th largest. I think that's right. We start to talk about the Columbia River, same size as Susquehanna. If those of you that are old enough or have heard of 3 Mile Island, at 3 Mile Island, that was the Susquehanna. It's the biggest freshwater input into the Chesapeake Bay, which is the biggest bay in the lower 48. So that's the size, just to give you a comparable size. All right. Also the confluence of 2 major rivers, Willamette and Columbia. And then Asa Lovejoy lost the bet. So the place at the confluence was named after Pettigrove's hometown, Portland, Maine. So here we are in Portland, Oregon. Okay, for the coin toss. And I think it was something like $50 each. Yeah. And the question is, I've heard a lot of meetings, and that's the thing, is like when things got so convoluted and Native people displaced, that the Chinook or Calapooian word for Stillwater is how we derive the name for Willamette. But for the falls, meaning obviously after the falls, the Stillwater. Multnomah County, it'll show up here in a minute. There it goes. Chinookian people, Lower Willamette, smallest but most populous. Just the one county is 20% of the state. If you do the tri-county, it's 60%. Okay. So zooming in more, Gresham, 4th largest, always competes with Hillsborough. Which one is fourth? Which one is fifth? But what we're looking at is East County. So 82nd to 257th, then that's the big, at the Troutdale truck stop, right at the edge of the gorge. That's 257th or Graham or Kane or Orient. It just keeps changing names. So that's where the numbers comes from 82nd to 257. Okay. And that's East Multnomah County. Okay. Gresham was named after some, like, I don't know, it's the same, like some white guy somewhere. But they formally adopted the name in 1805, named after a postmaster general. And then we come to Mount Hood Community College, which you've seen some pictures of. Built in 66, it started in 66. I think it was completed around that time of that picture, 72. Over 18,000 students. And then the Kelly Dam connected the two sides of the campus. Okay, and it's basically a big earthen mound, the sidewalk on the top. It's 70 feet by 300. I mean, it basically is a football field. It's a big pile of dirt, really. It's not significant. It should not take 10 million to move it, but it does because of where it is. Okay, so this is a swipe that works somewhat. So what I was trying to show is if you swipe it, and you might be able to do it on your phone easier than I can. So that shows it blank, like the shape of East Multnomah versus the cities. Okay, and then this, where you see Gresham, the edge of Gresham, if I keep going, so 213 is Highway 82nd. So it's here, 82nd Avenue, to the edge of Troutdale. That's East County. That's the point of showing you this way. Okay, that's the numbers. And I've been working actually with USGS because I'm fine if I can find something and download it. They're far cleverer and they can like make shape files and do stuff. So eventually this map will be improved with they'll actually make an East County shape file. And that'll be pretty neat that we can do some things with. Because they're interested, they're doing some stuff on the 205 corridor, again, about getting that sense of place, not just going and restoring the place, but who are the people? Whose space are we restoring? Right? Are we displacing them? Are we making it all worse? Are we making it better? Instead of being so hyper-focused on river miles and fish, right? So this is some of the work that I do in terms of many people, when I talk about GIS, like overwhelmingly it's mountains and rivers and LiDAR and all of that stuff is fantastic. DEMs, you can make beautiful maps, beautiful pictures. You can see it on the website. I've done some. I was interested in the people on the place. And so the CDC and these buttons, when you are playing on your own device, I won't do it here, might make something break, but all of these are live. So this will take you to the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. It'll take you to that website, which is what's called GRASP. So the G for GRASP is for geospatial. Okay. And so what they have done is mapped the people. And the reason they were doing that for social vulnerability, they're the CDC, they were concerned about health. Like, where do we have to put the pop-ups during the heat event? Who do we need to evacuate? Like, who's vulnerable? And so that they knew how to act and react, the people. So, but they mapped it. And so that is how you create these. All right. These social vulnerability mappings. Okay. And if you're any scientist of any kind, you realize when you're seeing a pattern, it's not random. So when you see this pattern and you see a highway, and it's outside the highway, the whole length is the most vulnerable. That's by design. That's on purpose. That's a pattern. That's East County in that. And so that's why having those maps are going to be neat, because you'll be able to see the whole of East County as this red blob with highways running through it. And that explains everything. That explains impervious surfaces. That explains heat. So many of the things that we talk about that we want to restore. It also explains, like, that's where the poor people of color are. That's where they were banished to. That's where they were zoned into. They didn't have a choice. Okay? It's by design. Multnomah County has recently released all of their documents when they did their zoning from those days. And they purposely said, oh, put the black people over where the dump is. We'll purposely build this dam because we know the indigenous people depend on salmon for their food. So if we kill the salmon, we kill them. I mean, the writing, it is documented. I know it's painful. You sit there and you just, what? Like to even hear it. Can you imagine reading it? Can you imagine that being you? Shocking. Okay. But it's there. They released it for us all to see. Like this was by design. It's on purpose. Okay. It's not random. So this is the social vulnerability one. I made a couple other ones. This one is the heat one, showing you the table for the heat one. Same thing. If you click the button, it'll send you to that portion of the CDC website. You can see all the metadata you ever wanted. They're live. It does explain how they created the table. And so basically you get a rank order score, 0 to 1. The higher it is, the darker your color is. And just like heat, you can see along the highways, that's where social vulnerability is. All right. And then this last one, I embedded. I did it by variant. And they did heat first because heat's the biggest killer by far. Bigger than floods and hurricanes and all the things that make the dramatic pictures. But heat, people just die alone in their house. They don't make dramatic pictures. All right. So that's why they did heat first, because it's the biggest killer. So they did social vulnerability, they did environmental justice, and they did heat. Okay. So those are the ones you can overlay depending on what you're trying to do. And then the site went down, and then it came back up, and then they haven't been able to update it. Like now we're in this vortex until next census, probably. So this might be the best data we get for a long, long time. Okay. So this one is the bivariate, it's the overlap, and it says click anywhere to interact. I won't do it. But basically, if you can see what I purposely did, I kept the colors the same. The red was the social vulnerability, the blue was the heat. Okay. But where they overlap, red and blue is purple. I know you wouldn't be able to see it. I just made it day glow orange. Okay, just for obvious popping. So you can see where it pops. And it's the same place where you saw all the vulnerability, you saw all the heat. It's the same old pattern. And this, I just made it interactive because you can type in your place, you can change the base map, you can zoom it in. You know, it makes it so that, again, like you guys on your phone, you can manipulate and find where you are and see which one you fall into. All right. So this is where we talk about the East County focus. Let's see if it all works. We got it. The pickles. All right. So this is where the pickles play, the college summer team, where Willamette Cemetery is. It's the place that got hardest hit by the heat dome. Of any heat dome, the one in 21 was particularly bad. Okay, at 116. And that's the NASA images of it. That's the scalding of the trees. So an area the size of Rhode Island got scalded in terms of how many trees will eventually die, apparently. Okay, and the reason it was so bad and why it scorched 5% of the western hemlocks and Doug firs is because not only was it hot, it was a summer solstice. So we had all the long days that go till 10 o'clock at night. So it blasted the trees. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. And it cooked the shellfish in their shells. Because the other thing that's great at this time of year is clam digs. Because the big negative tides. Because all the beds are exposed. Everybody's at the coast. Places like here. Digging the clams. Okay? It's shoulder to shoulder out there. They got cooked because those long days, the negative tides, they literally got cooked in their shells. Something like 1 billion shellfish died. And I know it's just like, it's horrifying. All right? Also, what got cooked in their shells were the people. And so this is the vulnerability map you've seen. That is the other one is the forest cover, which I think they're finally updated. That's from 19, but I think they've got a new one. So you can see where it's bald and there's no highways. It's way hotter. Okay, so that's what this is. And same if you look at Beaverton. See where it's bald and no highways? It's way hotter. So everywhere you look, where you see these bald splotches, that's where you got it the worst. Okay. Portland leads the league in terms of intra-city disparity. 21% on the bald side, 56 on the hot side. It makes a 20-degree temperature difference. So when it's 116, guess what it was on the other side? That's why 72% of the deaths, 72 deaths, something like 2/3 happened in East County. People got cooked in their shells. 136 is hot enough to fry an egg. It is hot enough to cook a roast. All right. That's from the memorial at Leach Botanical Gardens, which thankfully is still open. It's about to shut. They always have seemingly run out of money because they're in a poor area. But they managed to get a huge ton of private donations to keep them open at least till June. Okay, but that's the memorial at Leach. And this talks about Rockwood. So that's one of the poorest neighborhoods of the community college. So it's in a poor neighborhood, essentially. And this is the tree planting that happened after the whole big high heat in the DACA Park. And if you scroll down, there's like links to the campfire dolls and like how the DACA Park was recreated and people speaking in Spanish. Like, I mean, it just shows the diversity of that community. And they allowed us, Friends of Trees allowed folks who lost friends and relatives to come and plant trees. So they specifically planted the 72 trees. Other organizations gave more trees to get to that goal of 33%. But remember, it's currently 21, same as New York City. So one side of Portland's not Portland. Okay, that's the thing to remember. The one thing. And that's some of the kind of trees they planted. The big hardwoods, the big shade trees. They're called musclewood because they are sinewy like that. And then this is a GIF. It just runs through. It shows you the high heat, social availability, high heat, and then it shows the, so that's what this is. And then it gets back to the beginning with the pickle. So the point of showing you all of this, as we get to City of Gresham, hang on, is this. 18.5% immigrant, 91 different languages spoken. Those lovely little girls. All right, and then this is the numbers. Meaning all the people that got displaced, it's from Albina. They got banished to the numbers. Okay, so that's why all the black people are there now. Because they were in Albina, but Albina got blown apart to build I-5. So now they got put where I-205 is. So like, it's like they can't win, poor darlings. Okay, and this is a link to the Oregonia did a series of 5, which they included Japanese internment. They included all of these things about displaced neighborhoods, what happened to people of color in the city of Portland, and their lack of coverage of it. So like they pulled themselves into the fray with this one. And then this just shows Multnomah County specific, that heat index, and you can see those dots. Like this is the darkest, the worst, the 80 to 100. You can see all these places, like all the places on the map when you just look at. All the places on the map where the highways are. So that's just the Multnomah County version of the federal stuff. And then same is this one. That's Gresham's version of the federal stuff, where they so that they could figure out where they need to plant trees. And then they went around and interviewed people when they were doing tree planting. All of these things that are buttons and videos and all this stuff, it comes to life. I don't do it in the live presentation because you already saw like the damn thing went black, like you didn't want to stress it out. So, you know, I let people go home and look at it themselves on their own time with their own devices and like, you know, sit with it for a minute because it's a lot of things depending if you never looked at it before. All right. So that brings us to Mount Community College and the Kelly Dam removal and why we're doing that. So this is just the end. This shows you just some of the pictures of like what you just saw. I made the collage of when they were constructing. So this one is the picture where the policies. That's Kelly. Out with the sidewalk on top. So this one's on campus, the best. Okay, that's the impoundment behind the lake, the quote, Mount Hood Lake. Okay, that is too hot for fish. Only a matter of time for us to talk about bloom and start killing the dogs. All right. So when people, my people, ODFW people, and all these things, well, it's a fishing opportunity. I just have to breathe and say it's too hot for fish. Since 2018, it's been really intermittent. You can't fish there because you put them in the back. And everyone that looks at it knows it's only a matter of time for us to talk scallop bloom, just like the ones on the Willamette, just like the ones in Selwood, just like ones all over the city. Everybody knows it's coming. Everybody knows to keep the dog on a leash. The vets know to adjust their emergency schedule. They know they're going to start getting sick dogs. All right. So please, like, I understand fishing opportunities. I think it is fantastic. But could you listen to this community that watched their friends and family cook to death, that are asking you get rid of this thing, make it a free flowing river that is cool for them? It is cool for fish. It helps everyone. Can you bring those values into the sphere? So that's what this shows. And again, I just got my warning, and that's okay. That's why I give you guys the link where you can kind of scroll through and see what it looks like now. For example, that's the impound by the lake, those sorts of things. And the other part, like we show which phase we're in, etc. We talk about salmon safe, and you can scroll this way and see some of the things that with the runoff, impervious surfaces. Whoops. If you click on each picture, by the way, it does get bigger if you can't see it. Talks about toxic tire dust, which I know Alexis and others have been very kind to make that be the splash page on their website. We did. Thank you. We've done a bunch of in other story maps. I talk about that more extensively, but it's always linked, and you can go to that page if you want to learn more. And I think it's linked here. And that is the horror, the pain of pre-spawn mortality of the coho and the people getting rid of it, getting rid of these impervious surfaces. This shows what the impervious surfaces look like. This shows some of the bonus whales. You can see it enters here, goes to the plants, comes up. Yep. Okay. And also it gets rid of toxic heavy metals, by the way. All sorts of other stuff. This is what it looks like. So obviously impervious all the way down there to pervious. So I think just you don't have to be a scientist to realize that that's better water. So creating rain gardens. This is all Mount Hood Community College. That is why they are salmon safe, because they've done stuff like this. All right. And the first community college, still maybe the only, be salmon safe. That happened in 16, so now 10 years. All right. So that is everything at light speed. There's a lot in this story map. That's why I give people the link to it so you guys can go and look. But this is kind of the conversations that we are trying to bring at Sandy. This happens to be the lower. We're bringing similar conversations to the upper, and start listening to the people in that community. Stop being so fixated on river miles and large wood and all the things that we're so used to talking about. And they're not a bad thing. It's just like, remember, this isn't zero sum. Like, it's not an or, it's an and. Like, you can put large wood and also think about the community. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm really confident that we can do this. All right. Like, what I'm asking for is not a big leap. It's about looking at the space where you're in. Realizing you're standing in a neighborhood. Okay, restore the fish thing, but also, what about the neighborhood? Why don't you do something that helps them at the same time? So that's kind of what we hope to pivot to at Sandy. The upper's a whole different show with flooding and a project that collapsed, and that's a different story, man. But it has many of the same themes. Listen to that community. Figure out what they want, what they're experiencing. They've had 300-year floods in 30 years. So we kind of need to change the term. Okay. So, I mean, and that's kind of what we're saying. You know, I get what restoration people do, and I'm glad they do it. I'm saying, you know, bring some other voices into the frame. And I will leave that for questioning because, like, I know we're out of time. So that's me. Thank you. So go ahead. You guys ask questions. I can scroll to any part, or you can yourself look at parts. And this is the pipe coming out the end, by the way, the quote, Mount Hood Pond. Yes.
The data that you in Portland, Southern Oregon, Jackson County, curious about is that
Absolutely. So, oh, heck yeah. Every census tract, everything, national, whole thing. That's one of the reasons when they took it down, they had to put it back because it's actually public health and safety. So it's not about some DEI agenda. It's about how do you evacuate communities, who is most vulnerable, those sorts of things. So in a different PowerPoint, a different story map, what I start with, I call it the catch-up map, meaning it's the whole state. And you can see where all the red blobs are. And a huge red blob is Klamath, Medford, South Road, all of it.
where can I get that?
If on that any story map, like here, I think I've clicked one since we're not carrying more, but all of them. Okay. So if we go to place and health. That,
CDC silver.
so it's literally called place and health. And remember the G is for geospatial. So GRASP is the full name, Geospatial Research Analysis and Services Program. So basically they took all their data and visualized it, made it into something you could download into a GIS map. And that's the social vulnerability index in this same area. That's where you find health. That's why you find environmental justice. There's the metadata, there's the tables, all of it. All of it, all of it. Okay. And it's downloadable. You can do it by census tract, you can do it by county, you can go wild. But yes. But you can find and you will see that and that's one of the things I talk about. It's not just urban or rural, it's urban and rural. There's vulnerable places all over the state. It's not about your particular geography. And so that's why a lot of the conversations we're having in the upper are just like the ones we're having in the lower. They're very, very similar. Okay. So like if we realize that we're more alike than we're different, we'll stop with this hollering and screaming. So, but yes, go crazy on the CDC website. There's a lot.
To go back to the there 8 months new year, what are some things that you'll
So the website. So I started January 6th because again, everyone went on vacation and had Christmas and that's fine. But we wanted to get cracking. It's like we had a lot to do. And one of the things that I've done since, I have updated, it still has a lot more to do, but I've gotten some maps, an interactive map, and I've updated the website. I have a temporary office in the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership because they're kind. They gave me a QB since we thought we were going to be at Mount Hood Community College, but that kind of collapsed. So I ended up there. And so some of the initial projects, we were doing a lot of outreach. I'm going to a lot of meetings and hearing about everyone's concerns. The number one thing I hear everywhere is waste, is trash. And in fact, the lovely OED people, it was Liz, sent me an email this morning from DSL that, meaning Department of State Lands, that they have a grant program for removing trash. So, I mean, and like I said, I hear it upper to lower. Like I was just up at the upper and poor dear Greg, if you guys know him, he's the district ranger for Zigzag. I watched 4 pickup truck loads of people just show up in his parking lot and dump all this trash from Lolo Pass. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
this next makes sense. So, really good.
Yes. Yes, it's just a slower process working with them. But yes, and really probably for the first several years, who knows how many, given the funding environment, there'll be 1 employee. Me. And so it's running around meeting people. You know, Sandy collapsed and that caused a whole shit ton of problems, excuse my language. So like just figuring out what happened, meeting folks, finding what the needs are, having a strategic plan, knowing who we can partner with. That's going to be a huge lift just to get going, getting the website going, getting maps. We didn't have maps. We had nothing. So that'll be the initial time. And then when we're ready to partner, then we can go off like gangbusters, meaning, who do we partner for trash? Who do we partner for blank? Like LSEP wants to do a whole bunch at the Delta. This other group wants to do a whole bunch of flooding at the upper. Like how do we do all of that with one person? And that's what everyone needs to remember. That's what we keep saying. It's one person. And they're part of the Sandy Basin Partners. So they are there. It's just usually it's just one person. It's just so hard. Like just like I'm one person. Like it's hard to get folks on the phone. It's hard to have meetings. It's everybody's running around. But I mean, everybody's in the sphere and knows and is trying to help. And we always make sure we know that they are included, even though they might not physically be able to make it. We get it.
Create both sections of both of your approaches to how you're talking about it. There's quite a range of science dialogue across different spheres of social community, especially when you have a map that starts out really wide, then validates, drills down, validates, drills down. I mean, that's, science at its purest, and you're expecting that. My curiosity in your process now is if you could share where someone is already bought in on one of the many different ways where you've shown that you're willing to go. And they just say, look, this is just us, we're ready to go. That practicality wouldn't have to draw that down from all of that inertia that you create. Ways that maybe you can, an anecdote you could share with everyone that might be dealing with how to communicate science through work in a practical sense instead of going further because you know so much more.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were hoping to do with community outreach, and that's a bunch more work I'll have to do. I've created one infographic. I hope to create some more. Again, we're talking about 91 different languages in the lower, so more pictures, less words. Okay, so we're trying to literally just explain things to people. So that will be a lot of our outreach in terms of like, this is your water, this is what it means. Like, I mean, there are people, a salmon could jump up out of the lake and slap them. They wouldn't know because they're not from here. Like, so I mean, it really is, all about like just getting people on this page and like, do you realize how this could help you? Because this could be a cool space you could come when it's hot, those sorts of things. So it's that level of engagement, education, just getting people into the sphere. And then also as we are able to move forward, like when we're doing things like tree planting and trash pickup, getting them out there volunteering and then they can see it. They can not just hear it. Because one of the things I always say is like, you can't be what you can't see. Like you've got to get people connected. You got to get people in it. So that's what we hope to do. Again, it just will take time, and it'll take a lot of time, like creating all the popular material, things like that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I first want to say I appreciate the walking and chewing gum, and I think that's absolutely, so I'm with Clackamas Stolen Water, and so we are in the kind of the upper watershed. A lot of this wasn't touched on that. So I'm kind of curious where your guys' where you feel like you're gonna kind of like practically like start in upper watershed, and is there any kind of look at like continuity with like what the prior watershed iteration was doing and looking at some of the legwork that was done at least at that point in time?
Well, yes. Okay. So we are not the old, we are the new. That we have to be very, very clear, especially considering how Sandy went down. Like we cannot be associated with that. There was like lawsuits and criminal stuff, and I mean, like they lost their C3. We now have fiscal sponsorship. That's the way we needed that clean break. There's no other way to do that. Okay, so I have been to meetings in the upper watershed. Again, we didn't use their PowerPoint this time. I've been to the district. I've been all over the place. I haven't been to the town of Sandy yet. I've been through it. But one of the things that we're going to have to start again, if you will, is the project that Sandy crashed and burned on was in the upper. Okay. And without saying too much about it, basically it was always underfunded. And this was an agency that never had more than 4 people. And they were trying to do a stage 0 restoration. Not going to work. The estimates that they got, the lowest was 1.7, the highest 2.7. They never got more than 900,000. Okay. That's just the skinny. Okay, that's just what we know. Where that money went, what they did, then they got sued because they never paid the engineering firm. It just went on and on and on. Okay, so it is about approaching like you have this perfect U shape, 60 feet wide, 400 houses on each side in a floodplain. How are we going to deal with that? You saw all the landowners, BLM, Forest Service, private, Portland Water Bureau's in there. There's all these, and they were expecting Sandy to step into that and just be project lead. So the more you hear about it, the more you realize why they failed, frankly, that it never should have been allowed to happen, frankly. And I've already said that in Sandy Basin meetings that there will not be a repeat of that. Okay. But there will be lots of community engagement, working with the county, working with emergency services, because one of the big things that we're talking about is fire right now with the snow drought. Okay, and getting people to understand by getting your river back from a water jet to something that's sinuous and sticks around and creates humidity and beavers come, that protects you from fire. So like getting people there and realizing it's going to take years. It's going to take a long, long time, because that 1.7 to 2.7, that was based on $2012. Exactly. I heard all of you guys snicker. Yeah. So we're talking millions. We're talking 400 landowners just to start, at least. That's just in Timberline Rim. All the rest of them, there's another 150 down the road. There's another this one. This is going to be big. It's reach level. So no one tiny little watershed's going to do it. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot. And people need to understand that buy-in and really just have, I'll make a story map that kind of frames some of this more, and like lots more pictures and lots more talking, and realizing, maybe you were sold a bill of goods the first time. Okay. You're like somebody that's coming at you now with radical candor and telling you straight. I mean, like, just, it might take you a minute, but you need to kind of take that on board, because I will never make any kind of claim that I'm going to come in and do a stage 0 reach level restoration for you. Okay. That never should have been done. So hopefully I've answered your question. I've been interacting with Jay Wilson and a bunch of stuff for Clackamas. And we've also said to them, we're a community agency. We're not county, we're not state, we're not city. We're just doing our best here. And we will phone our friends and maybe they can come and help and do this whole big restoration that we can't do. We'll do our part with grant writing.
I think part of this radical candor too. I think for us, help understand, help other people understand what is their role and responsibility, and then to help shape us. Wants us to do projects, right? That's the bread, and we understand it. But as we brand new, it's really important to set us up for success, for long-term success. And I think understanding as a convener what that means for everybody, then we can then understand our niche. So it might be that this first year, like there's a grant that last year put us on as a part of community engagement. So basically, outreach education type stuff. And I think we're happy to do that. And I think that's a great role to get our name out there, to understand, what this organization is. And then, we have partnerships with people of color outdoors, manslaughter, and other groups. So through this work, I think these things will naturally evolve. There'll be some really great small scale stuff that we'll kind of start with, that we'll start engaging people, become a model. Leslie's the drone pilot. We're going to use a drone. We're going to do some cool outreach materials with this and really kind of celebrate what it is that we do. And then once we start doing that, I think